Let me read you a psalm. Psalm 1. Happy are those who do not follow the advice of the wicked, or take the path of sinners, or sit in the seat of the scoffers. But their delight is in the law of the Lord. On his way, or in his laws, they meditate day and night. They're like trees planted by streams of water, which yield their fruit in its season, and their leaves do not wither. In all they do, they will prosper, but the wicked are not so. They are like the chaff which the wind drives away. Therefore the wicked will not stand in judgment, nor sinners in the congregation of the righteous. For the Lord watches over the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked will perish. Well, I'm Chuck Olson, and glad to be a part of the life of this congregation and to share with you a psalm this morning. It's a psalm that I memorized as a 10-year-old, although I couldn't repeat it today. In the church I grew up in, a United Presbyterian church, we were encouraged to memorize the Psalms, Psalm 1, Psalm 23, Psalm 100, and others. Encouraged by the pastor's wife, and particularly encouraged by my mother. And I often wondered, why was it so important for the preacher's wife and for my parents that I memorize the Psalms? As I grew older and decided to go into the ministry and went to seminary, I did my student work at the Hebron United Presbyterian Church near Pittsburgh, and discovered that the origins of that church came as a result of a church split in the mid-1880s. A split between the Penn Hills United Presbyterian Church and the Hebron Church. It seems that the folks at Hebron were upset with a practice that was introduced at the other church, which was the introduction of a hymn book. And they only were familiar with a psalter, a psalm book, a book of music based on the Psalms. Then I grew to some appreciation that for over 400 years, we Presbyterians, starting in Geneva with the Psalter, and then the Scottish folks who had their Scottish Psalters, that it was so important that we sing, quote, the words of God, and not the words of, at that time, words of men. Well, the story continues because after my dad died, my mother married a gentleman farmer from Sterling, Kansas, who was not a Presbyterian, a United Presbyterians, but who came out of a Scottish tradition of the Reformed Presbyterian Church. They had a seminary in Wilkinsburg at Pittsburgh. They had a college at Geneva in western Pennsylvania. And they were the psalm singers. My mother was a church organist, started out as a church pianist. She loved the hymns of the church. She loved good music. And she married a farmer who belonged to a church who did not use instruments. They would use them in the fellowship hall, but not in the sanctuary for the worship of God. And they only would sing the Psalms. So a song leader would get up, give them a pitch, and they usually, in 4-part harmony, would sing the Psalms. What was so important to those folks? That they would not even use, quote, the words of no common language, but only the Psalms of God. Well, if you go to Augustine, he made some reference to those early Psalms. He said, while he was waiting for a baptism, "Oh my God, how I cried to you when I read the Psalms of David, the Psalms of faith, the utterances of devotion that allow no pride of spirit to enter in. How they kindled in me, O God, my love for you." Augustine said they're being sung all over the world. There's no one who could hide himself from your heat, Psalm 19. He wished that others were nearby and could watch my face and hearing my cries to see what the psalm had done for me. The Psalms are a means of finding and expressing our love for God. And our love for God is deep-seated in us through these Psalms. So Psalm 1 is an introduction to the Psalms. It's talking about the two paths of life, the path of the righteous and the path of the wicked, and how important it is to incorporate into our very being those Psalms. So morning, noon, and night. In fact, I believe that day starts not in the morning, but day starts as evening. So Psalm 4 talks about resting in God, abiding in God, laying down to rest, not letting the sun go down, for instance, on our anger. We start the day by yielding to God, by relaxing in God's love and presence. And I have a theory that most of the Psalms were written between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. in the morning, as the psalmist is trying to struggle with what is the way of the righteous and what is the way of the wicked, and how do we choose those paths and live and grow into God's love. So I would invite you into a journey with the Psalms. It won't be long until we'll be coming into the season of Lent, and I'll comment more at that time, the day after Ash Wednesday, as we are beginning a journey to Jerusalem, a journey into faith, a journey into and with the Psalms. So may God bless you as you walk together and grow into God's love. Amen.